Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to each one of you. Please kindly settle down. The distinguished speakers, the chairman, other dignitaries already arrived. We'll commence the program. Just for the benefit of people who are still having a cup of tea, I think before they come in, I thought I'll update you on some of the events, what's happening so that you don't miss them. The next event is happening on the Monday, the 24th. It's happening. You too can inspiration, wisdom, advice from entrepreneurs. This is Prakash Iyer. He's a managing director. Now is a motivational speaker, TED speaker, and he's advisor. He's a brilliant speaker. I urge upon you to not to miss this event. And he's written a book, beautiful book, and he's written a number of books on leadership. And he's very brilliant speaker. Please do come. It's happening at the same venue, Prakash Iyer, and this will be chaired by C.K. Kumaravel. He's also written about his journey in the entrepreneurship in the book. He's going to be chairing the session. Then on 27th, we have a book reading session on emotional intelligence 2.0, and it's happening at MMA Seminar Hall. We have got four brilliant panelists: Ranganathan, MD of Grundfos, and Soma Valliyappan, trainer, writer; Narayanan, founder of Gadura Academy; and Ganesh Kumar. Then on the this is happening at MMA office, no? It's from 6 to 7:30 at MMA Seminar Hall. Then on Friday, 28 July, we have a practical issues in GST. This is happening, I thought maybe the end of the month is nice to take a stock of what have you understood. If you have understood something, is you get to understand there's something happening. Bhupati and Co. Chartered Account is going to brief you. By the time we'll have a lot of inputs and you also know what the e-way bills and which is not introduced. Quite a number of things which have been postponed. I think they are very good at it, Bhupati and Co. Chartered Accountant. It's happening on 28th of July. In the month of August, as I mentioned to you earlier, on the 3rd of August, we have a very nice event jointly with IMA. The theme is Leadership for Growth. It's happening Thursday, 3rd of August at Lee Meridian. We got some phenomenal speakers lined up. Pratap C. Reddy, Chairman Apollo Hospital. Sunil Kant Munjal is Chairman of Shivakumar is again Chairman CEO of Pepsi. Ustad Amjad Ali Khan, Aman Khan, Ayan and his wife Subbalakshmi as a family, how they run the family instead of music. Then we got Baldev Singh and Pramod Bazin, former chairman founder of Genpact. Santosh Desai, MD of Future Brands. Bala, you all know Great Lakes, Bala Balchandran, Swami, RKF Swami BPDO, Preeta Reddy, Executive Vice Chairman of Apollo Hospitals, Ambi Brand Consultant, Srivatram, Raju, Suresh Reddy and Rajesh Chagman. It's a brilliant speaker. We don't want any one of you to miss this event. So that's why though we incur about 4,000 plus on the cost of all putting this event together, Meridian, a 5-star hotel, we are giving you a very good offer. What offer we are given? Yes, you pay for one, including service tax, 2,000 rupees. Bring your companion free, totally. Bring your any company, we have no issue. You can bring your partner, friend, colleague. At least 2 of you join together. Why? Because the president has kindly agreed to subsidize because it's IMA event, not MMA event. The balance of 1,000 rupees, he said, we'll take the cost. Because we wanted MMA members not to miss this event. It's a not to miss event actually. Please go register yourself with, because we already got quite a number of registrations. We'll be closing it about 350. So when you go out, even you are not a member, you are my guest today, this is applicable to you too, sir. You can just register yourself, put your mobile number, my team will connect with you tomorrow. I think people are still coming in. Another 2 minutes I'll take so that we'll start the program not on time. Then we have again on the 17th of August, we have a MMA case talk on change management by Purnalingam, very senior IAS officer. He's done phenomenal number of change in the government department. It's worth doing it actually. Then we have an event on the 1st of September jointly with McKinsey. The theme is just not decided, but it's happening with McKinsey. Please do come. Then on the 5th, you have an uncommon leader by Aviz. Then on the 6th of September, again we have a MMA Chinni Krishnan Cabin Care Innovation Award. It's happening at Kamarajarangam, 6th September. It's one of the beautiful events. We bring in some fantastic innovators who are achievers to come and showcase to you. I think some of you attended this event. This is the 3rd time we are doing that. Please do come. And on the 22nd and 23rd of September, we have All India Management Student Convention. Again, this is also happening at Kamarajarangam. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you all know you all must be eagerly waiting. I don't want to make you wait. We are all actually blessed to get this event to us, and I must personally thank Mr. Azit Burma, a good friend of mine, and also IMT Ghaziabad for choosing MMA to do this platform, this event. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome only and only one, and Dr. Parasuraman, who is come all the way from USA and is visiting India from Miami, and Srikanth, who is going to chair the session, and also I also request The Director, Atish Chattopadhyay, Director, IMT Ghaziabad. Warm welcome to you, sir. May I request the dignitary please take on your place on the dais, Mr. Parasuraman, Mr. Srikanth, Mr. Atish. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of warm welcome applause to our distinguished. And my warm welcome to all the viewers who are watching this program live from all over India. Maybe some of our members who are abroad. Very warm welcome to each one of you. As usual, if you have any question, send it across. I will put up to the speaker to attend to your concern, answer your query. And without much ado, let me have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Srikanth. Mr. Srikanth is the immediate past president of MMA, you all aware of it. And he is one person who's stood by us and pushed us to bring one of the state-of-art complex which is coming up. Maybe by, I think we are almost there, by first week of November onwards, we will do all our events in our own program, our own complex, which is state-of-art 25,000 square foot building across the road. So we are very, I can assure you, you'll be so proud to get connected and tell your friends, if they don't renew the membership, they may not get membership to MMA. It's going to be a real premium. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Srikanth. Srikanth is a BE Mechanical graduate and did his master's from University in Proton University of USA. He joined with Breaks India Private Limited in the year 1984 and presently he is a joint managing director of the company. He started his career with Sundaram Polymer, involved in the manufacturing of engineering plastic compounds, injection molding. He continues to be associated with the company as now as a part of the Breaks India. Srikanth has over 20 years in senior management experience, mainly in operations. He is also serving on the board of several associate companies. He is also chairman of the Real Talent Engineering Limited and also the managing director of ABI Showa Tech and board member of a number of other companies. Srikanth is the immediate past president of Madras Management Association. Ladies and gentlemen, very, very warm welcome to each one of you. Warm welcome to our distinguished speaker. I request Mr. Srikanth to please introduce the speaker and take it forward, sir. Over to Mr. Srikanth.
Good evening, gentlemen. It is indeed my privilege to introduce today's presentation by Dr. Parasuraman on the theme Driving Competitive Advantage Through Service Excellence. We are extremely gratified to organize this event jointly with IMT Ghaziabad and thank Mr. Atish Chattopadhyay for facilitating this event in Chennai. In today's Uber-driven economy, with increasing integration of service and technology, service engineering has thrown open many possibilities in achieving service excellence. We believe this is a moment for corporate India to derive competitive advantage out of service excellence and build a strong differentiator. I strongly believe that this presentation has a lot of relevance to the city of Chennai. Having achieved prominence in manufacturing, automotive and aerospace areas, it can now add a multiplier effect to its growth story through service excellence. Dr. Parasuraman is an influential figure in the field of services marketing, widely known for his work on Serve Equal, ES Qual and the Technology Readiness Index, TRI. As you are aware, he is at present the James W. McLemore Chair in Marketing, Professor and Department Chair at the University of Miami, Florida, in the US. Amongst the substantive list of felicitations, awards, and accolades, Dr. Parasuraman was also inducted as a Fellow of the American Marketing Association, AMA. He has been recognized by the AMA in 2016 for the lifetime achievement and contributions to the field of marketing. One of the workspaces in AMA's new Global Support Center in Chicago has been named as Parashuraman's Grateful Room, if I'm right. He has published over 100 articles in prestigious academic and management journals. Ladies and gentlemen, there could be none better than Dr. Parasuraman to talk on this important current topic of interest. And I'm sure at the end of his talk, he'll be happy to answer your questions and clarifications. And it is now my great pleasure to invite him to the podium for his presentation. Thank you.
Now, my privilege to invite Mr. Ashish Chattopadhyay. He's a director, IMT Ghaziabad, who's chose MMA to present this event today, and we are indeed grateful to you, sir. And may I request you please share your thoughts to the members of MMA. Mr. Ashish, please.
Thank you, sir. Respected Mr. Srikanth, Professor Parasuraman, distinguished audience. First of all, it's a pleasure and privilege to be here at Chennai, and particularly to associate with Madras Management Association to host this event. It is a very good example of an institute collaborating with industry association to bring in scholarship or scholarly work to the practitioners. I think that is one of the key ideas of this multi-city workshop which is being organized. IMT Ghaziabad is one of the few institutions early on which was promoted by an entrepreneur turned industrialist, late Sri Mahendranath ji. And hence practice resides at the core of IMT Ghaziabad. Now the way, I would just spend 2 minutes maybe on the way this whole idea came. It is around a year or so back that I came to IMT Ghaziabad as director. And one of the first things that we wanted to look at was when we are grooming our MBA students for future leadership roles, what are the key competencies that are required for them in the changing context. And we did a curriculum reorientation or rejig last year. And while doing so, we were privileged to have none other than Professor Srikanth Datar, who wrote a book, Rethinking the MBA, some time back, along with 2 other authors, as to what are the key competencies required for leaders of the future. Professor Srikanth Datar, of course, happens to be the Associate Dean at Harvard Business School. He led our curriculum rejig, and we introduced few things which are very, very relevant and contextual, and the present class of 2017-19 is actually going through that curriculum. To brief you what we introduced, basically we said that, for leadership grooming starts with self-awareness and an agenda for self-development. So we introduced courses like Personal Growth Lab, Outbound Leadership Lab. You are, sir, a group captain, you will appreciate that. And then mentoring by industry practitioners, senior level industry practitioners, as to how to plan for a career. We also infuse courses in the area of design thinking, critical thinking, negotiation, and a very interesting course on sustainability and social responsibility. Our students in the first year of the program worked with the social organizations through the government, like the District Magistrate's Office, Superintendent of Police's Office, and worked on real life social issues. And that is a required part of the curriculum. Now that is what we say, what is required in the long run to function as a leader. So as we grow up the leader, as we grow in our professional career, what happens is in the initial years we need skills for our first job, which are more to do with technical skills. As we become a CEO, what becomes important are the people skills. So the first year is about developing people and the social skills, whereas the second year in our curriculum is devoted to the areas of specialization like marketing, finance, information management, etc. Then we wanted to see what is more contextual and relevant. We were just discussing and how marketing has changed, for example. So within marketing, for example, we introduced areas which are very specialized, like marketing research and analytics, media and entertainment management, digital marketing, and of course, service management. Now, this is an interesting change that we did, and we did a lot of focus on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking. I think IMT Ghaziabad may be the only institution in India where students do two internships, sir. One, the conventional summer internship, and then in the second year, all of them are required to go for an entrepreneurial immersion or a startup internship, internship with startups. That is compulsory for every student. As we had that curriculum, we were actually looking at, what we need to cover. The architecture was ready. And when we were looking at the curriculum of other institutions, benchmarking with some of the top institutions, what struck us was the fact that there was very little discussion on the whole gamut of service. Now, if we look at India, I think India is getting increasingly positioned as a service economy. And the competitive advantage of India probably will lie in its differentiation in terms of service. If China is about manufacturing, India will probably be about service. Yesterday we had a very interesting discussion where the Maruti's executive director learning and development was there in Delhi in the similar panel, and Maruti has maintained its leadership probably because it has been rated #1 in customer service. Given this backdrop, we wanted to see how service can be integrated in the entire conversation system. And who better than Professor Parasuraman to guide us in this journey. We are grateful to you, sir, for agreeing to be a mentor, guide, and to handhold us in this journey. Over the last 5 days during his visit, of course, previously we had a lot of discussions over Skype, phone, etc. We have arrived at 2-3 things. Number one is that we are going to have a clear focus when it comes to service at IMT Ghaziabad. What we intend to do is to create a platform for service excellence in India. There are two important words here. One is the India word and the second is the platform. A platform means where academia and practice can come together, where scholars across the globe can come together. And two, it will be India centric. For 3 important aspects. One is creation, second is dissemination, which is for the students and the executives, and number 3, implementation of the knowledge for practice. I think that is the reason why we want somebody to guide us, somebody as eminent as Professor Parasuraman. Few things that we have planned in the short run, because one is to plan, but there has to be some visible action on the ground. By the first quarter of the next year, that is by 2018 first quarter, we are going to come up with a service excellence index to measure service across industries in India. That is one. Okay? And that will be a very important thing, because then we understand how it is different across sectors, across geographies, etc. 2, I think all of you have experienced service failure, and sir will talk about the gap model. Mr. Shrikant also touched about that. The second aspect that we will be focusing on is service failure and service recovery. Case studies on service failure and service recovery. So what it means is where the gaps are. If you have to excel going forward, you have to identify the gaps and work on those gaps to really make India excellent when it comes to service. And that is the topic for today, which is competitive advantage through service excellence in an increasingly technology dominated era. Why? Because probably technology and service convergence is also happening. And who better than Professor Parasuraman to talk about this? We are eager to gain from your thoughts, sir. I thank MMA once again for hosting us and to make this event possible. And we look forward to many such, events and collaborations going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sash. Moving forward, I think I will take liberty to share with you, Ajit Burman. I think we are planning a lot of collaborative courses with IMT Ghaziabad. One such a plan is do about series of certificate courses, maybe 10 to 12 certificate courses, which ultimately culminate in giving a PG diploma in management. Actually, a lot of things we are planning. I hope, I think with your thing and friend like us, we will be able to move forward. Sir, may I request Dr. Parasuraman please step forward and do the honor of addressing our members of MMA. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of welcome address to Dr. Parasuraman.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I usually don't like to stand at the podium and talk, so I was going to have a collar mic. In fact, I had all suited up to do a dog and pony show walking up and down. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I heard that they are live streaming this by video, so I think it's logistically a little bit easier if I just stayed in one place. So I'm just I got rid of the microphone, I'll just use this. A very good afternoon to all of you. I really appreciate your taking the time from your busy schedules to come here and listen to me talk for the next 35-40 minutes. First of all, before I launch on my presentation, I want to kind of add my own reinforcement and enthusiasm for what IMT Ghaziabad is doing. Because in my stage in my career, one of the things that I've been toying with for a number of years now is to how can some of the knowledge that I've over the decades acquired in the US in the domain of service quality and customer service and so forth, how can I find a forum to kind of bring that back to India. So I've been waiting for this opportunity. I come to India often, but usually I just do a 2-3 day MDP at ISB or IMA or whatever, and then I go back. So I was really looking for something more permanent and enduring. And lo and behold, I think all the stars were lined up. I met Atish about 18 months ago, and then we periodically talked about it, and then now it is all coming together. So again, just to reiterate, I think the launching of the Center for Service Excellence, there is no other center like this anywhere in the world actually. There are a lot of service centers and so forth, but not an overall Center for Service Excellence across industries. And also, as Adish said, it's going to be India-centric because India is a very complex and a very fascinating country in terms of some of the challenges and as well as opportunities. So I think that, along with the launching of the Service Excellence Index, are going to provide the initial momentum that we hope that the Institute will be able to sort of build on and launch a whole host of activities and initiatives under this broad umbrella of this platform which we are calling the Center for Service Excellence. So I'm really privileged and honored to be a part of this effort. All right, so for my remarks, I chose this topic of gaining competitive advantage through service excellence in an increasingly technology-dominated era. Because it is technology-related talk, I would like to start with a favorite quote of mine. This is from Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon. He said some time ago, in the offline world, 30% of a company's resources are spent providing a good customer experience, and 70% goes to marketing. By marketing, he is referring to the traditional forms of marketing, advertisements, commercials, sales, people making sales calls, and so forth. Then he goes on to say, but online, 70% should be devoted to creating a great customer experience, and 30% should be spent on shouting about it. It's interesting that he's equating traditional marketing to shouting, which unfortunately is still true in many cases. Companies are, by and large, are very, very good at making promises through very, creative commercials, very creative messages, very eye-catching messages, and so forth. And the same thing is happening now in online also. Companies are very, very good at external marketing, and yet I think what he's suggesting is basically what his quote implies is achieving sustainable competitive advantage in today's markets requires serving customers in excellent fashion, not just selling to them. So with that as a starting point, let me also point out the traditionally viewed levers of competitive advantage. What are different ways that companies can gain competitive advantage? Certainly they can gain some competitive advantage through product features by coming up with unique features or something that competitors may not have. Of course, a lot of companies still today compete on the basis of price. So by really pricing low, you try to attract and then retain the market. And then third is you can compete on service. So if you look at the three broad, I'm kind of oversimplifying things a bit, but these are the three major buckets or sources of competitive advantage. Product features and price are relatively easy for competitors to copy. In fact, it is becoming increasingly easy for competitors to mimic product features and also copy price. Of the four so-called P's of the marketing mix, price is the easiest thing to change. So there's nothing to prevent a competitor from blindly mimicking what a leading player in a marketplace does in the pricing domain. But what can, in fact, be more difficult for competitors to copy is the service. So the key, really, of these three buckets or sources of advantage, potential competitive advantages, is really service. In terms of service, again, as has already been alluded to earlier by the speakers, technology and service are converging. Technology continues to increase at a very, very rapid pace, and technology, in addition to complementing service providers, is also actually starting to replace service providers. For example, we've all been exposed to, this is a self-service checkout counter in a supermarket in the US. I think it's also there in India in some places, self-service. Of course, all of us have used to seeing these things at airports. These are self-service kiosks. And taking this one step further, there's actually a hotel in Japan called the Henna Hotel, where it's completely operated by robots. Completely, there's no human contact at all. I mean, this is going to increasingly be the way of the future. So the question then arises as to what does this do to the customer's experience? And in this regard, I'd like to start out by asking two sort of rhetorical questions. My first question is, are companies utilizing technology primarily to cut costs and increase service productivity, or to enhance customer experience? So I'm throwing this out as a rhetorical question, and the way I would answer it is to say that it's typically the former. Because I think companies are latching on to all of these, up-to-date technologies as a way of further reducing cost. And how can we use technology to improve our bottom line? There's nothing wrong with that, but then the problem is, on the other side, what does it do to the experience of the customer is something that gets a short shrift. The second question is, does the growing role of technology in service necessarily enhance customer experience? Again, this is a rhetorical question. I would say not necessarily. Not necessarily. Not everything that is technology-based is necessarily something that creates a great experience for customers. So with those two opening questions, what I would like to focus on my remarks today are to offer some thoughts on effective customer experience management in this era of increasing technology service convergence by drawing upon 3 specific streams of research that I've been involved in for over 35 years now. The first stream is service quality, which I think many of you may have heard a little bit about. More recently, I've gotten into this whole area of technology readiness of people, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then this issue of service productivity as well, because one of the primary outcomes of this service technology convergence is service productivity and its implications for productivity for companies. So I will just draw from my research on all of these 3 things. Now, a couple of other caveats that I want to mention here. One is that each of these research streams I've been working on at least for the past 10 years. Service quality, I'm still working on it. I started in the early 80s. Technology readiness is something that I started working on the mid-1990s. I'm still going through that. Service productivity is an issue that I've started looking at in the last 10 years. So it's impossible for me to share with you all of the insights that I've learned from these decades worth of research. So what I will try to do is to just highlight a few things as a platform for discussion and some questions. So I unfortunately will not be able to go into great depth on each of these things. So let's start with what is customer experience management, since that is the main outcome-oriented focus of today's session. Let me start with a definition provided by a well-known academic in this area, Professor Bernd Schmidt. He's a distinguished professor in Columbia University. He's written books on customer experience management. He defines customer experience management as the process of strategically managing a customer's entire experience with a product or a company. The key here is the total journey of a customer with a company. Here's a definition from the more popular press. This is actually I picked this up from the website of Salesforce.com, which is a well-known company in the technology space. They define customer experience management as a collection of processes a company uses to track, oversee, and organize every interaction between a customer and an organization throughout the customer life cycle to optimize interactions from the customer's perspective. So the key words here are that every interaction needs to be managed, and also in every interaction there needs to be some optimization occurring in terms of what is the best way to interact with that customer at that particular point in time in their journey with the company. This is where the technology human trade-offs come in. And then just to sort of reiterate some of the same things, here's another definition which basically emphasizes once again the same kinds of themes entirely from the customer's perspective across the entire journey and so on. So if you look at the way both the academic literature and the popular press literature are looking at customer experience management, the following seem to be the key imperatives for effective customer experience management. To be effective, customer experience management should take the customer's perspective, not the company's perspective. It's not what the company thinks is a great experience for the customer. You really need to see it from the customer lens, from the outside in. Focus on all customer firm interactions, and then optimize those interactions. Those are the 3 key themes. Okay, now I'll try to tie these in with some of my own research findings. So let me start with the first stream. Some key insights from my journey researching this whole notion of quality of service. So what is service quality? What my research shows is that from a customer's perspective, service quality results from a comparison of service expectations with their actual service experience. In other words, all of us either explicitly or many times implicitly have some mental standards of what an excellent company should be able to provide. And then we compare that with what a particular company is providing as we interact with that company. So it's a very kind of simple definition, but it's based on a lot of research. And secondly, I'd also like to observe, based on a whole host of findings, that the customer service experience frequently falls short of their expectations. In fact, I would be harsh and say that by and large, quality of service and service excellence stink across sectors. There are pockets of excellence here and there, but by and large, it's mediocre at best. More often, it's less than mediocre. So here I'd like to then introduce the GAPS model of service quality. Again, some of you might already be familiar with it, so I won't dwell on this. So starting with the customer perspective, as I just said, quality of service can be conceptualized as this gap or discrepancy between what customers think should happen in an excellent organization and what they actually perceive an organization as providing. So if you label this gap as gap 5, what my research, extensive research with a lot of different organizations in a number of sectors suggests is that there are 4 major disconnects within service companies that in turn contribute to this gap 5. So what are these gaps? The first gap, and in my opinion, the most serious gap to this day in many companies, is what I call a market information gap. You see, a lot of companies with good intentions, they make a lot of investments in the name of improving service. But they make those investments based on assumptions about customer expectations. They don't really understand what is really more important or less important to customers. And then once there is a disconnect here between the organization or the management's understanding of customers' expectations and what the customer's expectations really are, then there's a whole series of other problems that could also occur. For example, it's the senior management and other executives in the organization that are in charge of coming up with the guidelines or the specifications for delivering the service. So oftentimes those specifications or organizational service standards don't necessarily reflect what the customer really wants, because there's already a gap 1 here, and then that gets compounded by this, what I call the service standards gap. My research shows that even in instances when the gap 1 is completely absent, in other words, top management is fully aware of what the customers want, top managers don't always translate or transform that knowledge into specifications in any kind of accurate manner. So the standards that may be in place may be totally different from what the customer really wants. And then even if there are service standards, there is often a service performance gap, because the systems that are supposed to deliver, the people that are supposed to deliver aren't properly trained, or they aren't properly supported to be able to meet the company's own internal standards. And then the final gap here is what I call an internal communication gap. Earlier we referred to the fact that customer experience management requires that you manage all of their interactions. The problem here is that these different touch points at which customers interact with companies are all being executed by different functional areas within the organization. And there is a lack of internal communication across those touch points. For example, marketing typically doesn't interact all that much with operations. And yet, as one example, and yet if you think about what happens is that marketing goes out and makes all of these promises to customers, and so the expectations go up, and then the people in the company in charge of delivering on those promises, belong to a completely different functional area. Oftentimes it's the operations people or the IT people or whoever they are. So this internal disconnect, lack of communication actually is one of the direct contributors to this external gap. So conceptually then, what the model suggests is that to truly improve quality of service, you need to close this gap 5 on the external marketplace, but to close that, you need to systematically diagnose and close these internal gaps. Now, I would argue that of these 4 internal gaps, as I already alluded to, the first gap is a major disconnect. Major disconnect that actually leads to misallocation of resources right from the beginning. And since we are talking today about the role of technology in service delivery or the technology service convergence, let me give you an example, a personal example of mine that really goes to the heart of what I'm saying in terms of misallocation of resources. As part of my travels around the world, I stay in a lot of different hotels, go on lots of different airlines and so forth. And this is actually an example from India. A few years back, I was staying at a 5-star hotel that shall remain unnamed in Delhi. Of course, as far as the appearance aspects and the people greeting you at the door and so forth, everything was just perfect. Everybody was very polite and very nice, and everything was fine. But then when I went up to my room, I noticed something different that I had not seen anywhere else, at least at that time. Now I see it in a lot of other hotels because another malaise that I sort of observe in the service sectors in a lot of different countries is that the moment one competitor does something, everybody else blindly copies it. There's a lot of monkey see, monkey do. That happens in many companies. Anyway, getting back to my example. So what is it that attracted my attention? So I found this bedside electronic panel with a lot of different knobs and buttons to control all of the electronics and other kinds of mechanical devices in the room. Like you could open and close the drapes with pressing a button, and you can turn on and off the TV, you can dim the lights or increase the light, so all kinds of things. So being a mechanical engineer, I was fascinated with this, but despite being a mechanical engineer, it took me 15 minutes to figure out all the buttons first. So that is problem number 1. But because I was curious, I didn't mind that kind of investment in time. So I thought I mastered it, and then I went and I was busy with a series of meetings, and by the time I got back, it was almost midnight. I was very tired. I just wanted to go to sleep. So I brushed my teeth and I get into bed, and then I started turning off lights from this panel. So I got most of it off, but I couldn't turn the bathroom light off. Maybe I was too tired, I was missing the button. I tried for a couple of minutes, I couldn't do it. Then I said, okay, this might be this. So I press it, and then all of a sudden mood lighting starts coming. Suddenly the radio goes off. So I said, oh damn, now I have to get out of bed and go to the bathroom and physically turn it off. So I thought I'll do it. So I go to the bathroom, but there is no switch there. I have to do it from the panel, because it's all in one panel. So I said, okay, I'll just shut the door. But then when you shut the door, there is still a crack at the bottom. The light is coming through that. So I took a very, very low-tech solution. I took a towel and then I blocked that crack so that the light won't come and bother me. I mean, this is a true story. And I'm sure many of you can empathize with these kinds of interactions. Not exactly the same example, but this is what I mean. That sometimes, because the technology is available, companies willy-nilly introduce that. And they think that customers' experience is going to increase. I will come back to this example when we talk about service productivity later during my remarks. But this is the kind of misguided, not well thought through investments that doesn't necessarily increase or improve the customer service experience, and yet also are not beneficial to the companies in terms of their own investments. Misallocation of investments. Now, in addition to the gaps model, another major output of my program of research on service quality has been the CirQual instrument. The CirQual is actually a measurement instrument to operationalize and quantify that gap 5. Again, through 2 or 3 years worth of research, which actually was required to develop this instrument, what I've discovered is that there are 5 major categories of facets of service that customers use in judging this expectation versus perceptions gap. There are tangibles, reliability, responsiveness, assurance, and empathy. Most of these terms are self-explanatory, so I won't waste time explaining what these are. But interestingly, what the findings from a number of different studies that have employed the CirQual approach shows is that of the 5 attributes of CirQual, reliability, which has to do with consistently delivering the promised or expected service, is the most critical dimension. In fact, when we ask customers in a number of different sectors to allocate a total of 100 points to the 5 attributes of service quality, reliability consistently gets the highest number of points allocated. Now, what does this mean? This doesn't mean that the other attributes are not important. In fact, all 5 attributes are important because they are like the boiled down version that emerged from all of the, we started with hundreds of different attributes. And then through a series of research studies, we tried to boil it down to what are the core attributes of service that really define this external gap. And so these are all important, but the most important takeaway here is that, of course, it's important that you have good tangibles. Your salespeople, your service people have to appear neat, appear attractive, and so forth. You need to be responsive, empathetic, and reassuring. But above and beyond everything else, when you promise to do something, you better do so. And this, again, often is missing in many companies, even today. Reliability shortfall is one of the major shortfalls in many companies. Another important insight that has emerged from our stream of research on quality of service is that when you think of expectations, many customers, in fact, I would claim that most customers have a range of expectations rather than a single level of expectations, ideal level of expectations. They have a range of expectations going from what we call a desired service. A desired service is the level of service that customers believe can and should be delivered. In other words, this is what they would ideally like to get from companies. But most customers, contrary to what managers think, are quite reasonable as well. When we talk to managers, they say, oh, customers are always asking for things. They don't understand how complex our organization is. Not true. Extensive research with a lot of customers says that, yeah, ideally we'd like to get this, but we know. The people that serve us are human, they might make mistakes, organizations have their own constraints, so we are willing to slack. We are willing to lower our expectations, but up to a point. That point is the lower boundary of what we are calling a zone of tolerance. So we're calling this adequate service, which is the minimum level of service that customers are willing to accept. Now, this might seem like a very simple concept, but it's a very powerful concept because it tells companies and managers that, when you think about satisfying customers and improving your service, at least try and deliver a level of service that falls within their zone. You don't have to always shoot for the star to keep customers happy. But even here, as I'll show you on the next charts, sometimes, the service level is very close to the adequate service level or sometimes even below the adequate service level. So we have taken this notion of zone of tolerance and we have further refined the CirQual approach to be able to measure both the desired level of service that customers have and the adequate level of service that customers have to see what is the size of the zone of tolerance and how does that vary across the 5 dimensions of CERQUAL. And again, there's a lot of 2-3 years worth of research that I'm condensing in 2 minutes here. But one chart I'd like to share with you is this. Using this refined CERQUAL approach, we have measured the quality of service of a number of different companies. This is for a computer manufacturing company, by the way, which is IBM. So we did a survey in the B2B space where we surveyed about 1,000 business customers of IBM in the United States. And we asked them to fill out this refined CERQUAL survey, which has several questions related to each of the 5 dimensions that you see here. So when you look at in the results here, the red dots actually refer to the service quality perception. This is the average perception of customers in terms of the quality of service on each of the 5 dimensions. Those are the red dots. And then the yellow rectangles are the zones of tolerance. So, and as you can clearly see from this, the best performance of IBM is on tangibles. Now, tangibles refers to aspects of the service that are readily observable, like the appearance of the service people that might visit the client's facility to do repair service or diagnose problems and so forth, the appearance of the invoices, how easy is it to understand, the appearance of the vehicles in which the service person might come, all of the visual, tangible elements. And there, the overall perception of the customer base, IBM's customer base, is actually slightly above the desired level. But look at these other 4 attributes. They're all barely above the adequate service level. Now, I'd like to make one other very important point, which is that many customer service service quality surveys and customer satisfaction surveys, when they do these surveys, they don't measure the extent of expectations. I'm sure many of you also fill out surveys, and if you reflect on what those surveys look like, most of them have a bunch of attributes, and they say, on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, how would you rate us? Basically, the information that you're getting from those kinds of surveys is perceptual data. What your perception is of the performance of a given company on those various attributes. Now, in this case, suppose we had not obtained information about the desired level of service and the minimum level of service for each of these attributes. Suppose we only had asked them questions about the perceptions. This is what the chart would look like. This is what the chart would look like. And if you are a bunch of IBM managers looking at this, what would your overall interpretation be about your level of service? Probably very, very high or very good. You might be tempted to pat yourself on the back and say, job well done, so let's continue to do what we are doing. But when you superimpose the zone of tolerance, you're definitely not going to come up with the same conclusion. The red dots haven't changed. All I've done is to superimpose what the customer's expectations are relative to what they're perceiving. So the point I want to make here is that if you want to truly improve quality of service, at least make some effort to understand what the customer's expectations are. Simply implementing some strategies and then measuring what their perceptions are might actually give you a false sense of security. You might think that things are great. In fact, even today when I talk to companies, some leading companies, they say, oh, we did a customer satisfaction survey, and 95% of our customers give us a score of 8 to 10 on a 10-point scale. So things must be good. But not so. When you ask them also questions about expectations, you'll see what the current what the actual status of your customer service is. All right, now I want to move on to my next stream, which directly pertains to the topic of technology. So as I said, I've been doing a stream of research projects on this whole notion of technology readiness of consumers. So what is technology readiness? By technology readiness, I mean people's propensity to embrace and use new technologies for accomplishing goals in home life and at work. So what I mean by technology readiness is a mental attitude. It's not, technology readiness is not a measure of a person's ability to use certain things. It's a measure, more a measure of a person's attitude towards something. Attitudes towards using technology-based modes of service delivery. It's almost like a hardwired internal personality trait, type of trait when it comes to reactions to technology-based systems. So we come up with this idea of technology readiness, and what our empirical research in this domain of technology readiness shows is that technology, what we are calling technology readiness, actually consists of 4 major components, and I will quickly go through these. The first 2 components that you see on top here are what I call contributors towards the technology readiness. First is optimism. By optimism, I'm referring to the overall feeling that technology is a good thing. You know, nowadays technology is coming down the pike at a rapidly increasing rate. You know, a lot of new technologies are coming, and you know, what do customers feel about all of these things? And what our research shows that there is wide variation in terms of how optimistic people are about all of these accelerating changes. There are some people that feel that these changes are very good. I mean, society is getting better, society is improving, whereas at the other extreme are people that are very concerned about this. They don't think all of this technology is a positive thing for society. Likewise, innovativeness has to do with a general tendency to try out new things, being innovative, not hesitant to try new things. Now here again, as you might suspect, we are finding a broad spectrum of attitudes towards things that are cutting edge, things that are really new. You know, for example, if there's Apple is coming up with a new, you know, iPhone 6s or 8s or 7s or whatever it is, you know, there'll be some diehard fans that will stand in a queue for 48 hours, even in, you know, inclement weather, to be the first ones to buy it. But then, for every one person that's like that, there may be 5 others that would be say, why are these fools standing in line? I mean, you just wait for one more week and then you'll be able to buy it without standing. So, you know, this goes to this thing of innovativeness. Some people are very eager to try new things, whereas others are more reluctant to try it. So people that score high on optimism and high on innovativeness will have higher TR scores. Now, when you go to the negative side, we got discomfort and insecurity. Discomfort is sort of like an overall paranoia about technology, that somehow technology is controlling you rather than you being in control of technology. Now, most of us have a smartphone. Some of us have 2, and yet some others might have 3 or 4. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm carrying 2, but that's the story. See, this is perfectly timed. So the technology issues are rampant. What happened? Okay, good. All right. Thank you. So discomfort simply refers to an overall paranoia about technology. For example, some of us, especially speaking for myself, I love these devices because it gives you 24/7 connectivity anywhere in the world with anybody that you want to connect with. But then I often wonder, maybe I'm too old, I often wonder, what is this doing to my quality of life? Because I too, like some of these youngsters in the room, have the sudden urge to check and see Facebook. This itch to constantly be checking that device. And sometimes I pine for the good old days, 30 years ago when there was no internet, nothing. So once a day I used to go to my, mailbox and pick up the physical mail, come back to my desk, and then I don't have to worry about mail for another 24 hours. right? To really good old days. And then I also ask myself, was I any less productive 30 years ago as a researcher and as a scholar? No, not necessarily. Despite not having the internet, despite not having anything else, I was just as productive. In fact, some ways more productive than I am now with all of these distractions. So that's what I mean by discomfort. And I'm sure many of you in the room might also sometimes have these mixed feelings about technology. Insecurity is also kind of like a fear, but it's more transaction-specific fear. For example, if you do online banking and if you're depositing money electronically into one account, are you really sure it's going to go through? Or should you actually go to a physical bank branch and then complete the transaction face to face and feel more confident? So this is the issue here with the insecurity. And also now, of course, there is increasing insecurities about privacy and your personal information being stolen when you engage in electronic transactions. So overall technology readiness then is a combination of people's positions on these four components. And we have developed a scale and refined the scale and so forth to measure people's position on these four components. The first version of the scale actually came out in 2000. We call it the Technology Readiness Index, or the TRI. It's actually a 36-item scale, the original scale. And more recently, we have refined it further and updated it so that it's easier to use. And that came out just a couple of years ago, less than 2 years ago. We're calling it TRI 2.0. It's an updated and streamlined version, which appeared in 2015. And if you look at the overall distribution of the technology readiness scores, you see a nice bell-shaped normal distribution. Again, to reiterate the fact that there is wide variation in people's positions with respect to technology readiness. And more interestingly, we've also done some additional analyses to see if we can identify distinct segments or groups of people that have different technology profiles along those four components or four dimensions of technology readiness. And this is what we come up with. For example, one of the 5 segments that we have identified is what we are calling explorers. As you can see here, these are people that are high, high, low, low in terms of the 4 components. They are high on the 2 contributing dimensions, and they score quite low on the 2 inhibiting dimensions. So their approach to technology and their satisfaction with technology is going to be quite different from people, let's say, in the last category, just by contrast. These laggards are the exact opposite. They score very low on the contributing dimensions, and they have high fears, both overall fears, discomfort levels, and also insecurities. So the idea here is that in the modern times, when companies are introducing willy-nilly the latest technological gadgets, they often forget the fact that not everybody is going to react the same way. Of course, some companies say, well, we'll just train the customers to use this device. We'll just offer self-service technologies and remove all the personal help, but over a period of time we can train customers. What my research shows is that training, technology readiness is not something that you could train people, because it's like changing a personality of a person. Maybe over a period of time you may be able to change it, but not in the short term. So that again has some implications for how to judiciously deploy technologies to deliver service. So, and as you might expect then, in terms of appeal or preference of high touch or more human-based interaction channels versus more high-tech interaction channels, you can see the preferences vary in this dimension, vary in this manner across the 5 segments, right? So, and then a few insights from my stream on service productivity, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So So what is service productivity? The traditional view or definition of service productivity is that it's the ratio of inputs to outputs. I mean, this is a classic definition of productivity. And in a service context, again, it's the same. You know, what does a company put into a service process and what is it getting out of it? So this ratio of inputs to outputs. And what I would argue and have been arguing in my papers and other writings is that service productivity can and should be evaluated from the perspectives of not only companies, which is the traditional definition, but also from the customer's perspective. In other words, what I'm saying is that just as companies can have this kind of a definition of service productivity, you can also think of a mirror image of that from the customer side. Now, there is a lot of literature in the service domain that says that most services are involve an interaction between the customer. You know, the definition of service itself is that there is some interaction between the customer and the company, right? Some kind of interaction. Sometimes it occurs through technology, sometimes it occurs through human contact. So there's some interaction. To the extent that there is interaction between the customer and the company in terms of producing the service, you can also think of inputs and outputs from the customer's perspective. Customer also contributes certain things to the production of the service. Now, once you take that more broadened perspective, you can link the two, but unfortunately in many companies, the link between the two is currently missing. In fact, I would say that a vast majority of the companies today, when they think of service productivity and improving service productivity, they only think of the left-hand side. They don't even think of the right-hand side in terms of what happens on the customer side of the equation. So I would argue then that, you know, to sort of link the two things, you can go back to some of the, you know, basic concepts of quality of service and so forth. And that's what I've been trying to do in my current research stream on service productivity, try and introduce the notion of service quality and intertwine it with service productivity. And just because we are also at the beginning, I mentioned that our focus is going to be on customer experience management. We can start out by saying that if your quality of service is high, then the customer's experience is going to be good. I mean, that's a given, right? So this relationship here is going to, you don't have to do research to prove that link. So the quality of service is good, the customer's experience is going to be good. So there is a positive relationship here. Likewise, if you look at this link here, you can also expect a negative relationship. What I mean by that is that if the customer's inputs into a particular interaction are low, in terms of time and energy and mental, emotional energy, effort, and so on, then their quality of service should be high, and vice versa. You know, the customer has to go through a lot of effort and time and, you know, expend a lot of emotional energy. By emotional energy, I'm referring to customer frustration. Like when you call a call center and then you have to press this button, press that button, press this button, and you can never get a hold of a live person. When that happens, already the customer has tremendously expended a lot of inputs, right? So if the input is very high, then the quality of service is going to be low, and vice versa. So these two are pretty straightforward. Now, there are two other linkages that I want to discuss slightly more extensively. First is the link between the company's inputs and the quality of service. Now, I am hypothesizing a positive relationship here. It's a plus sign, but I'm putting it in a red circle. And the reason I'm putting it in a red circle is because ideally, this is what the relationship should be. You know, if the company is investing certain resources in the name of improving quality of service, it should improve if it is properly implemented. So ideally, it should be a plus. But I would further suggest that in reality, this is often negative. And I go back to my hotel example with that electronic panel. Was that an expensive thing for the hotel to do in terms of inputs? Yes or no? Yes. I mean, there's a lot of investment on the part of the hotel, right? So they had to spend considerable amount of resources to put that electronic panel. But then unfortunately, I felt like, I'd have been better off with the normal switches at the normal places. So my quality of service was low. So this relationship, in my particular case, rather than being positive, actually turned out to be negative. Same thing applies over here. Ideally, this relationship should be negative. So the company is investing a lot of resources in this service provision, which is again an interaction between the customer and the company. The customer's work needs to be reduced. The company is putting a lot of resources. The customer's resources should be lower, ideally. Ideally. Their life should be easier. But here again, I would argue that based on my own experience, or using that as an example, my experience as an example, this once again, rather than being positive, was actually, rather than being negative, was actually positive. Company expended a lot of resources, and then I, first of all, invested a lot of time and effort learning the system. And then at the end of the day, later in the evening, I also experienced a lot of emotional frustration with this device, right? So it turned out to be positive, actually. Their inputs were high, my inputs were also high. And this is what traditionally happens. So I would say that ideally, especially for technology-based service enhancements, this is a very important point to keep in mind. These relationships here would only be as shown in these red circles if the company's inputs are aligned with the customer's expectations, as well as their abilities and their technology readiness and so on. So to summarize then, effective customer experience management in an era of growing technology service convergence calls for thoughtful consideration of several basic but critical issues pertaining to service quality, technology readiness, and service productivity. In fact, I would argue that service quality, technology readiness, and service productivity, these are all intertwined concepts. They are all interrelated. And just to give you some examples of some of the things that companies might start thinking about in this regard, first of all, with respect to service quality, I think here are a couple of questions for starters that all companies should ask, which is that are customers' basic service expectations being met by the technology interfaces? Oftentimes the interfaces are so sophisticated because the companies have made them really complex, thinking that the more sophisticated the interfaces, the better the experience of the customer would be, which is really a faulty assumption. Likewise, and as another example, is the expected service delivered correctly and consistently. So that's something to also think about. Technology readiness. Are there significant variations in the technology readiness within our target market? There's a lot of literature on target marketing, market segmentation, and so forth. So for our given customer base, are there variations in the technology readiness? And then if there are variations in the technology readiness within our segments, then what are we doing do we also modify the way we interact with them based on that? Is human help readily available when our technology interfaces break down? And then finally, in the service productivity domain, are we overemphasizing internal efficiency or internal productivity in designing our technology-based interfaces? And I would argue that in many companies, this is in fact the case, that companies are introducing a lot of technology-based systems purely from a bottom line perspective because they want to improve internal efficiency, internal productivity. Do we pay sufficient attention to customer effort as well as the potential frustration and anxiety they might experience because of these technology-based service interfaces? So with that, I will stop, and we can open it up for questions.
Thanks, Professor, for the wonderful lecture. My question is, you have talked about this instrument that you have developed that is
Right.
serve call, where it seems to be measuring
Right.
the service quality. Normally in organizations, when you are trying your best to match up with the customer's expectations, there is always a cost element attached to that. So somewhere, there has to be a balance between the, the expectations and the cost, and how does this instrument take care of that?
Okay, the instrument just gives you a read on what the expectations are and how they are perceiving your particular service. Instrument doesn't take into account. It's just a starting point. If there's a huge gap, then the instrument only looks at the left-hand side of the so-called gaps model, the expectation percent. There's a whole host of things on the right-hand side which this instrument will not capture. So using the external measure of gap 5 as an input, then you have to dig a little bit deeper. You can ask yourself, customers' expectations are very high, as you're saying. So why is it? Why is it? Is it because our marketing people are over-promising? That raised the gap 4. And our operations people aren't able to deliver. Is it because of that? Are we simply hyping up our technology-based interfaces? And when the customers actually... Yes, absolutely. You'll have to have a deeper analysis of these things. And also, if you look at, I didn't have time to get into this. Remember, I put up a pie chart which shows that reliability is the most important dimension. You might remember that. And then the tangibles is the least. Now, let me ask you, when companies think of, we need to improve our image in the eyes of our customers, what is the first thing they change? Logo. Let's change the uniforms. Many of the airlines do that. Let's give all of our customer contact employees new uniforms. We'll improve our perception, our image. That's, right there, what you're doing, you're misallocating resources. So when you talk about the bottom line and cost, there are a lot of companies that can, in fact, have the opportunity to improve quality of service and close that gap 5 with no additional expense. If only they would focus their current resources that they are spending on the most appropriate areas. I think there's a lot of opportunities for improving quality of service by simply reallocating resources and emphasis internally to sort of reflect what the customer's expectations are.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. My question is regarding the GAPS model.
Right.
You mentioned that there are different departments, different personnel who are probably not gelling together.
Right.
And that's where the gap comes in.
Right.
Now, given the fact that the technology is an enabler, and your research shows that there's still a gap in spite of technology.
Right.
Don't you think the motivational levels and the very reason why a company exists, which is the purpose of the company, is the one which can give that, what I would say, quote with non-quote, spiritual impetus, the soul, for bringing in this harmony? To give you, take from your own example of the hotel.
Right.
The reason why the hotel exists, the purpose, whatever that is definitely not to give you technology. But they're trying to put a lot of investment in something for which they're not supposed to be putting in. It's just an additional. So the purpose of the company and the communication of the purpose within the various departments and people, right from top to bottom, is probably the answer for closing this gap. Everything else is what you see, but the soul of it is the purpose of the company.
Yeah, well said. I would agree that I think companies that have a very succinct and simple and yet very powerful vision to begin with.
Southwest Airlines, for example.
Yeah. What is that?
Southwest Airlines?
Southwest Airlines. I didn't hear it properly.
So the purpose drives
right.
how they manage.
Yeah, and there are, again, as I said, there are, Southwest Airlines is, even though they are a low budget airline, they have an internal culture that reflects that, because of course they compete on price, but that's not the only thing that they compete, because a lot of airlines can compete on price. And there have a lot of companies that competed on price, airlines, have gone out of business. The reason Southwest Airlines is succeeding is because, number one, their culture, which is what you're referring to. All employees, Southwest Airlines is one of the airlines that actually spends more money on employee recruiting and training than all of these, full-service carriers that charge a premium for their flights. It's really kind of counterintuitive, but because Southwest Airlines really feels in this customer orientation, and one of the things that is a part of their culture is also having a good sense of humor. I don't know if any of you have flown Southwest Airlines in the United States. If you have, you might have noticed that their frontline employees have a lot of freedom in the way they present their safety instructions. They can ad-lib. I mean, they have to communicate that message of, put your seatbelt on, how to use a life jacket, and all that. But they don't have to deliver it in a monotone where most of us fall asleep anyway, because we've heard it so many times. So they can ad-lib. So they give them a little bit of leeway to communicate the same message. So this does do things. One is, many of the employees are already recruited for their sense of humor. So sometimes they might, use jokes. They might say, well, in mid-flight, please do not open the exit door and try to get out. Things like that. They'll just ad-lib and everybody will laugh, and that way you create a little bit of excitement. So, but this doesn't happen by happenstance. In fact, one of the stock questions that are asked of all employees at all levels, Southwest Airlines is, can you tell a joke or something that happened to you that is humorous in your life? And really, and a lot of weightage is based on how that potential employee answers that question, how quickly they are able to answer and how creatively they are able to answer. And if they cannot answer or answer it in a way that is not very humorous, they are out, regardless of what their technical qualifications are for the job. So they cultivate this culture of fun and humor. Why is the fun and humor important? Because that is very consistent with the consumer segment which they would like to attract. They're not necessarily going after the business customer segment. They are going after a segment of the customers that would otherwise not fly at all. They'd rather drive or they won't go at all because there's too long a drive. America is a big country. You have to drive long distances. So they won't fly at all. So they want to attract that kind of segment, and usually those are the kind of the leisure travelers, not the business travelers. And there the pricing strategy also fits, low budget, so that's attractive, but also give them a good experience in doing so. Yes, because what they have done internally, organizationally, all of them are very consistent with this overall philosophy, as you correctly said. I mean, what is the vision? What are your core values? Humor and fun is part of their core values. And therefore, automatically, the customers' expectations are managed. Even when you look at their adverts and, commercials and so forth, they all have this fun element. So the expectations are that don't expect to get royal treatment when you come there, but you can have some fun. No assigned seats, and all customers understand that. And there's a whole set of operational issues that are all handled very well behind the scenes. Because if you don't have assigned seats, boarding takes a lot less time. In fact, we're talking about productivity, and to expand, kind of build on this, Southwest Airlines has the best record for turnaround time, because most of the flights spend most of the time on the air, not sitting at the gate. So their average turnaround time from a time a flight arrives to the flight is between 15 and 30 minutes, which is amazing. So.
Good evening, sir. I have a very basic question.
Yeah.
Please bear with me for asking this question. My question is, the service term what we have been using today's topic, is the service associated with the sales or the after sales service in case of automobile industry? Because I am an automobile engineer, my mind goes to only after sales service.
Okay.
So is this service what you are referring is associated with the service of sales?
Very good question. What I'm referring to as service refers to the pre-purchase experience of the customer, the during purchase experience, and the post-purchase, the entire journey. What do I mean by that? Let me also back up here, I usually make a distinction between customer service, singular, and services, plural. Now you're saying, you're automobile, from the automobile industry, so for you, the term service means after-sale service. The rest is all product marketing, because once you sell the car, then the service takes over. Is that correct? Okay, right. Now, if you take a bank, for example, where there's no manufactured product, right? So the bank offers a lot of different quote-unquote products also. They have loans, they have checking accounts, they have credit cards, and a whole host of other products. They can call them product, although it's not physical, right? Now, in your case, it's cars. It might have different styles of cars, with different power and so on. So yeah, you have certain product lines. The bank also has some product lines, product categories. Now, I would argue that, customer service, the term customer service, singular, refers to both types of organizations, manufacturing organizations and non-manufacturing organizations, and it sort of transcends the different phases of the customer's, pre-sale research the customer might do to pick the best service provider or the best car to buy, to the actual purchase experience itself and the post-purchase. In fact, the whole notion of this idea of establishing this Center for Service Excellence is exactly that. So I thank you for your question. May be basic, but it's a very important question, because excellence has to sort of transcend sectors. It needs to transcend boundaries. So, and you're absolutely right. What my experience suggests in working with many manufacturing companies is that they see a logical distinction between sales and service. And that's part of the problems with some of these internal communication gaps. The salespeople might do a very good job of selling the product, but then, the after-sale service doesn't live up to the expectations that may be implied by the initial experience of the customer during the sales process. Because the salesperson is very nice because they want to get the signature on the dotted line. So that itself is an implied promise that the customer's experience with the company is going to be good. But then when the service part kicks in, using your terminology, after sales, the experience is totally different. And the problem is the people that are providing that after-sales service, they have no notion of what the salespeople have actually done in terms of increasing expectations. Yeah, so in fact, one of the new, the director was just reminding me that as part of this IMT's rebranding effort and this focus on service excellence, one of the new courses as part of the management curriculum, marketing curriculum that we are introducing is what we are calling customer journey management. More than just customer experience management, which seems to be more transaction specific. We are actually labeling it customer journey management. And this applies not just to service companies, but to any company or any organization, starting right from when the customer has the first touch point with the customer to the time the customer finally exits and leaves the relationship with the company. So we are actually quite excited about that. But this is a very important point, sir. Thank you for raising it.
This survey, after this survey,
Yeah.
is always being used as a independent profit center. It is not, because whatever they lost in the sales, they want to catch up in the service.
Right. Again, see, this is part of the problem too. Where, yeah, this is part of the problem too. Yeah. So yeah, again, yesterday, in a panel, similar panel in New Delhi, we actually had the CTO, CIO of Maruti, Mr. Rajesh Uppal, was there, and he was saying that the way Maruti has achieved the highest satisfaction levels for domestic market, even though their cars are not always rated as the highest valued car, but their overall customer satisfaction index is consistently higher than the other players in the domestic market. And he was saying that because they strongly believe that service is something that has to occur throughout the customer's interaction, and he was describing some of the great lengths to which Maruti goes, even in terms of deploying technology to enable their frontline staff, right from the salespeople to the service people, to all sing from the same song sheet. He was, in fact, talking about a technology now they have where they use real-time information feeding to the frontline employee, whether they are in the sales department or the service department, doesn't matter, because they collect a lot of information of the customers and they communicate that. You know, oh, this is a very important customer, this is a repeat customer. A lot of times, you know, the service people have no clue. You know, they're just providing a service. And he was also saying that, you know, for them, service is an investment in strengthening the relationship. They don't view service as a profit center. That will ultimately come because relationship is what that provides sustainable profits in the long term. Yes, sir.
Most of these technology companies and most of the service companies, their service is really very good till there is a complaint.
Right.
Once there is a complaint, there is like for example, take the Uber or Paytm or most of this web-based companies. There is no way I can contact the customer center at all. If I have a complaint, I have to go through email and I'll have to wait for till they respond.
Right.
There's no way I can respond. So they know very well that the customer is not liking it, but they go along with this. Is it because they are trying to actually control the customer expectations right in the beginning itself when they are setting the company? That's what I want to check it out. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they actually control expectations, but I don't think they control expectations because they do know that the customer really doesn't have a choice. So they take it for granted that there are going to be customer frustrations and therefore they have to kind of live with it. You know, I personally experienced this in the US a lot. And ironically, you know, let me just give you another example. I said that as part of my profession, I stay in a lot of different hotels. You know, one of the sort of self-imposed punishment for me is that because having, you know, sort of immersed myself in service quality, I tend to notice even small things which I probably shouldn't notice, and that really bugs me. So going back to the airline example, I am based in Miami, Florida, and I fly American Airlines, which is one of the major carriers, not by choice, but because I almost feel like I'm a prisoner of American Airlines. I really don't have a choice because American controls about 75 to 80% of all the flights in and out of Miami International Airport. So now American thinks that I'm a very loyal customer. In fact, they keep sending me these thank you notes. You know, thank you for being a loyal Executive Platinum member, and occasionally they might say, okay, we're going to give you these 2 upgrades, you know, because you have achieved a certain level of, in fact, I am carrying a card-carrying 4 million mile flyer on American Airlines. But every time in every seminar a question like this comes, I'm bad-mouthing them. By saying, you know, how bad the service is. You know, since this is an Indian audience, you should be able to appreciate it. And also it relates to what you're saying. My first name is Anantha Narayanan. You know, in America, you know, they will struggle before they are able to pronounce it. So Anantha Narayanan has 16 letters if you count. You can see that I've counted and this is a point of frustration. So all in my passport and everything else, first name is Anantha Narayanan, last name is Parasuraman. So now you might have heard that American Airlines merged with US Airways, which is another major airline, about 3 years ago. And the merger was just completed 2 years ago. So in the process of merger, they merged the 2 reservation systems. I don't know what they did. You know, I'm not that much of a technology person, but something went wrong in the technology where now, whenever I go to their website to book a ticket or anything, as soon as I put in my credentials, you know, my frequent flyer number and my password, my web page comes up, pre-populated already with Anantha Narayanan, Parasuraman, all my details are there. All I have to do is, you know, pick the flights and then say, okay, buy it. But when I go to buy it, it says error. So what is the error? Your name doesn't match your frequent flyer number, but I didn't put it in, you're putting it in. You know, your records is the one that I'm going from. So, and then I called the Executive Platinum, you know, they have a separate desk. They have a separate toll-free number, so you can call them, and they're very polite in answering. And I've been struggling with this problem for 2 years, believe it or not. So I've talked to the Executive Platinum desk, and you know, those ladies, the people that answer, they are very, very polite, but they don't know how to solve this problem. But I figured out the problem, and I even told them what the problem is, but they are not able to correct it. The problem is that in some merging the two systems of the two airlines, they only allow 15 spaces for the first name. So the computer thinks somebody is trying to hack into my account when I say book. Then what I have to do now, which I'm also become good at, even though every time I do it, it aggravates me, is, you know, I got to log in as an anonymous person and then type my first name, and then I can type, I get all the way except the last N I cannot put in. And I don't have a frequent flyer number, because if I put in my frequent flyer number, it will say again, you know, it doesn't match. Because in their records, in their system, it's Anandanarayan and Parasuraman, and everything matches. So I book like an anonymous person, you know, whatever I want. Then I have to call the Executive Platinum desk and then tell them, can you please add my frequent flyer number to my record so that I get the mileage credit and everything else. So every time I have to go through this hassle. You know, it's a terrible thing in this day and age, and you know, everything was smooth until this merger occurred. So I know exactly what the problem is. In fact, I've gone beyond just talking to the person in the Executive Platinum desk. I said, connect me to your customer service. I've explained in detail what the problem is. I've emailed them explaining what my problem is. I've talked to senior executives in Dallas, and they said, oh, it's a programming problem. You know, they first tried to say, did you use Explorer or Google Chrome? I said, I've used Explorer, Google Chrome, I have also used Firefox. In all websites it's happening. I've used different computers. I've used my iPhone, I've used my laptop, I've used my PC in my office, it's the same problem. Oh, we'll get back to you, sir. They never get back. So finally I've given up now. So, you're absolutely right. You know, many companies, and of course it's a big waste of my resources, but it's also a waste of the resources of the company, right? So every time I call, there's a double work for the call center representatives, and then I've wasted a lot of time of their executives too, trying to have this communication. Finally, I've given up now. So I have a system. My only worry is that if I lose my Executive Platinum status sometime, I will not be able to use this privilege, because if you call the call center, there are $25 booking fee if you do it through their call center. If you book it online, there's no fee. So how am I going to be able to book it if I don't have the status? I don't know.
Good evening, Professor. And we are seeing you as a super guru, because my guru taught me serve-call model. Today I am teaching to students the serve-call model, actually. And I have a question. So I'm an entrepreneur, founder of a boutique market research firm. I'm using serve-call model in my customer satisfaction studies for my clients, actually, whom I'm doing. So we are seeing the service sector is expanding like anything, especially in a growing market like India. So this serve-call model, some places I'm unable to implement. So do you have any plans to launch a new version of serve-call model, and which would suit all the service sector and maximum of the service sector?
Let me give you a short answer to it, because it's a very deep question. I need to know what exactly the situation is. But generally, you know, serve-call, oftentimes, you know, people feel that the serve-call is something sort of, it's cast in concrete and you have to use it exactly the way it is. The way I view it and the way I've talked about serve-call is that the 5 dimensions and the specific attributes is just like a skeleton. So if you have a unique situation where, or some situations it's not working, then you ask, you are much more knowledgeable of that situation than I would be. So if you view this as a skeleton, as a starting point, then you can take it and you know, fine tune it, modify it, maybe changing the wording. Maybe if it's the problem of the certain words not being pertinent to a certain context, change the word. Capture the spirit of the 5 dimensions. So, and hopefully that will ease your burden a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you for a short and sweet presentation. My question is not highly technological driven, but
Hold up your microphone.
I need an answer for some correlation between words.
Okay.
So you started off with a word called CEM, which expansion was customer experience management. Then when you moved on to your talk, you started using the word expectations. And the general jargon what we have in all, especially in India, is customer satisfaction. Experience, expectation, satisfaction. Now, how does it correlate? Number one. Number two is, now taking your example of the hotel experience, I think it was a good example which everybody has got something to link it up. You said, since you are a mechanical engineer and a technological driven man, you didn't go into the aspect of why it is not functioning, have I to call somebody and check and all. Right. Now, putting a businessman into your shoe, or a man who is not knowledgeable on technology or anything, the very first thing what he will do as soon as he taps all the buttons and finds some things are not working, he'll pick up the phone, shout at the help desk, and call them and say that I'm not fully satisfied at all. Now, where does this not satisfied expectation and experience get linked to each other? I think in country like India, where some X percentage of the population is still not up to the technological understanding,
right.
Experience and expectations, if you only travel through the journey, you will be able to link those. But he goes into a hotel, checks in, and if it's nothing is working, he'll say, I'm not satisfied.
Yeah.
So how these three
Okay,
words
again, two deep questions, although they are related. Let me try and address it quickly. First of all, expectations is actually one of the important standards that's necessary to measure the customer satisfaction. Let me start with this. The three things you mentioned were experience, expectations, and satisfaction, right? Correct? The correlation among those three, right? So satisfaction literature kind of precedes the service quality literature. In the satisfaction literature also there is some expectations versus perception kind of definition, the theory of it. The key distinction, the service quality also, we are talking about expectations versus perceptions. The key distinction between the two constructs, and again, we have debated this in the literature, there's a lot of literature about what is the difference between customer satisfaction and service quality. Satisfaction is, the expectations in the satisfaction type of measurement is the customer's predictions of what is going to happen. Based on past experience, for example, they might have certain expectations. This is what I'm predicting is going to happen. Whereas service quality is at a slightly more elevated level. The expectations there refer more to sort of a desired level of service, not you think is going to happen. For example, when I go on American Airlines, I predict now what exactly is going to happen. So if my performance, if my perception of the service actually meets my prediction, I'll say, okay, it's just what I expected, so I'm okay with it. But simultaneously, I might also feel they could have done much better. This is where quality of service comes in. So, the expectation applies both to satisfaction and to service quality, but for service quality, the definition of expectation is much more idealistic rather than simply a predicted value for expectations. Now, how do these two relate to customer experience? Now, my simple answer would be that if you go look at the notion of customer journey management, that journey consists of many discrete touch points. At each of those touch points, you can have expectations and perceptions on service quality and customer satisfaction assessments. So if you sort of aggregate all of those, that results in the overall customer experience. And there are some techniques for doing that too. So that is the correlation that I would assign to link these three concepts. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, again, let me give you a very brief answer because I think we are running short of time. I can pick up the signals from the organizers here. But you remember that idea of zone of tolerance. Now, my simple answer, this is a little bit more complicated, but let me give you a simple answer. So I said that as long as the perceived performance of a customer falls within the zone of tolerance, right, the customer should be reasonably satisfied, reasonably happy. If the performance actually exceeds the desired level of service and does so consistently over multiple touch points, then that can be viewed as customer delight, because it's not like a one-off, sudden overperformance over the customer's desired service, but consistently exceeding the desired level of performance can lead to customer delight. And by the same token, if it consistently falls below the lower boundary of the zone of tolerance, I would say, you have disgusted and angry customers, customer disgust as being the opposite of customer delight.
Yeah, I believe in the last speaker. So what next after the seminar? I did a cheat sheet, so I looked up that you have written 3 books and a textbook. So if I am an MSME and we are into manufacturing and we need to start reading on these concepts to internalize it in our small company with 30, 40 employees and go on this journey, what would be the first step that we would do? I mean, attending this seminar was an eye-opener in some facets.
Okay.
So if, if I read books like The Goal by Goldratt and stuff like that, so which of your 3 books would be a starting point for a manufacturing company? We are not into services.
Oh, okay. That doesn't matter. As I already indicated in response to one of the earlier questions, whether you're a manufacturer or whether you're a service company,
Right.
many of these concepts can apply. A good starting point for you might be the book that is titled Marketing Services Computing Through Quality.
Right.
So that book kind of picks up on the gaps model. The delivering quality, there's a book called Delivering Quality Service.
Yes.
So that is an expansion of the gaps model. There's like
Okay.
a chapter on each of the gaps and a separate chapter on SERQUAL and a process for measuring. So if you're interested in reading more about the gaps, why they occur, what are the elements of the gaps, then the delivering quality services. But if you have a fairly good understanding of the delivering of the gaps model, then I would suggest the marketing services computing through quality as a better starting point, because it actually builds on the gaps model and says and talks about what are some of the things that companies can do to improve. And then the technology readiness, the third book,
Right.
Focuses purely on the technology readiness concept and what it constitutes and so forth.
Right. Thanks. And the last point, you mentioned Maruti a couple of times. I own a Maruti car. So the phone call from the customer service after the purchase and after a service. Sir, on a scale of 1 to 10, 7 being poor and 10 being excellent, what will you rate us as? I have owned many cars at the Indian level. Maruti does the same. Hyundai does the same. This is what the customer service asks the question. I fight back saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, how can 7 be poor? Oh, this is what I've been trained to ask. I said, I'm not answering this question. Please put the phone down.
In fact, ironically, I'm sorry, I don't want to prolong this, but it's really ironic. Actually, the same question came up in Delhi yesterday. By the way, I think this is a sort of like a chronic sickness in the automobile industry. Not only here in India, but also in the US. In the US again, the salesperson will actually call you and say, so please don't give us anything less than a 10. Because then we will be socked in our, reward systems and so forth. So if there's anything that we didn't do properly, please tell us and we'll try and fix it. When the damage is already done, you're not going to be able to fix it, right? So I think that's a flaw in the methodology, and which is unfortunate.
Thank you, sir, for that most enlightening and interesting talk. I request you to take your seat. Professor Parasuraman, thank you very much for coming to MMA today and delivering this talk on how excellence in service can lead to deriving competitive advantage for the companies and also delighting the customers. There were many learnings for me personally from your talk, but the most important, what I picked up today was the notion that reliability of service is what the customers expect the most when it comes to delivering the high level of service. The other things what you've explained to us today are mostly very technical, which I will take some time to internalize. Again, thank you once again for today.
Thank you, Doctor. As usual, fascinating evening. In fact, this evening before coming here, we had a serious discussion in MMA with our acoustic consultant who's from Australia. He said Syscom system is put in your boardroom, one just touchpad, will do everything, and everything will come automatically go. Now I'm really scared what to do there. Now we said it's very fascinating, but I think technology is growing. One more thing is a customer expectation, customer satisfaction, which is said. I know this evening, many of our members' satisfaction, you must be wondering, I'm beyond the tolerance level because we have to close it. You would like to keep going on with the questions till the evening because you got another engagement. That's the reason we have to interfere. I know our tolerance level will be much more than what thread dot where it will be. So it's a fascinating evening, and we are indeed delighted, honored to have you with us. May I request the President MMA to please present a memento on behalf of MMA, sir. Please do us the honor to accept Mr. Dr. Parasuraman. May I also request Srikanth to please present a memento to Satish for facilitating this event, coming all the way from Delhi to be with us this evening. Thank you, Mr. Satish. It's lovely having you with us. Come. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Sure.
Also, thank you so much, Group Captain, and thank you, MMA. So, may I request our Director, Dr. Atish Chattopadhyay, to present a memento to Chairman, Mr. Srikanth, and also to my dear friend, ED, Group Captain Vijay Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Bye-bye. Good night till we meet again.